Well, hello there, communication students. I'm Dr. Grimes, and I am the teacher for the class HR Staffing. That's the class that interviewed you last week or earlier this week for the jobs that you're interviewing for as part of your communications class. It's my objective through this project. This is about the fourth or fifth time that we've done this project. It's a twofold purpose. Number one, it gives you as the communication student an opportunity to practice creating your resume and cover letter and then engaging in a face-to-face interview like you will have once you get out of college into the real world. It also is an objective that my students who are going to be in human resources or who are going to be managers doing interviews have an opportunity to practice interviewing people before it becomes real. So you have an opportunity to brush up your skills, to polish your skills on doing interviews and answering questions in a tense situation. And my students have an opportunity to ask the questions and to build the scenarios and the settings and things like that. In order to give my students good feedback, you're going to be getting a survey from me. You'll get an email in your Radar account from mark.grimes@gsw.edu. Now, depending on which one particular situation you were in as an individual doing interviews, you'll get one of three versions of this survey. Some of you did a face-to-face interview with one of my students. You in the on-campus class may have been in that situation because there was only one candidate, one person from my class who was interviewing you as a candidate. It's not a question of whether you're going to remember which one you were talking to because there was only one person there. So on the first page of the survey, you'll just say, I interviewed for this particular job with this person, and then you'll start the process of answering the questions. If you're in one of the online classes, or maybe one of those students in the on-campus class that didn't have the ability to get a face-to-face interview, you may have interviewed with a team of one person. One of my students in the online class did this project by herself, and again, you'll have no problem remembering who she was because she was the only one on the call. But a lot of you will have done an interview with two people. In some cases, it was a boy and a girl, and it's not that hard to remember which one was which. In some cases, it was two females, and you might have trouble remembering which female was which. It's really important from our perspective that they told you who they were and they reminded you who they were. If in the process of doing this survey you couldn't remember which one was Susie and which one was Jill, it's going to be hard for you to give good feedback. It's important that I get as good a feedback as we possibly can. Now, going into this, I'm going to give you an overview of what to expect from this survey and how you can help me get the information that I need to give them feedback. But first, understand that this is a process that we are using for research, and there are certain rules that govern research in the academic environment. The first rule is that you don't have to participate. Now, you may be encouraged to by your teacher, and that's between you and your teacher. But from a strictly research perspective, you've got the right to say, no, I don't want to participate in this. Hopefully this is generic enough and it's anonymous enough to where you're not going to feel any pressure to give me honest feedback. But at any point in the process, you can say, I quit. And there are no penalties and there are no consequences. Again, we hope that you will fill out the survey and do it in good faith, believing that we're not going to try to punish you because you were critical of my students. So when you get this survey from me, it's going to come in the form of a Word document attached to an email. I want you to open it up, and you're going to see right off the bat a couple of questions. I agree to participate in this survey, yes or no. If you say yes, keep going. If you say no, go to the end. Number two, I did participate in an interview, yes or no. If you didn't participate in an interview, there's nothing to grade. If you did, we will continue. And then we will start talking about the individual people who did the interviews. And I'm looking for a couple of things here. One question is going to be related to their appearance. This particular pen is not going to work quite so well. Let's go to the other one. Appearance. We're hoping that all of my students who are doing the interviews show up nicely dressed. If they're on camera, they look well, they look nice from the waist up, what you can see. If they met with you face to face, that they were dressed well. Did their appearance appear to be professional? You will grade them on a scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree. Keep in mind that for almost every question on this survey, this is important to me, the positive answers are toward the right and the negative answers are toward the left. So if you want to kind of do this without thinking, checking the right side gives us positive information, checking the left side gives us negative information. But look at the headings on the particular questions. Their appearance was professional. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. The second thing is how they handled the process was professional. So they looked good and they were also dignified. They were well put together in terms of their thought processes, and they had a plan and a purpose and so forth. The third piece was communication. Was that professional? Did they know what they were doing? Did they stumble over their words? Did they act as a good representative of our organization? Strongly agree, strongly disagree. The last one may be the more important of that to me. And it is very simply, did they treat you with respect? That we can overcome appearance, we can overcome how we handled the process, we can overcome how professional we were in our communications, but if we didn't treat you with respect, we did something really, really wrong. So I'm really interested in your thoughts on that. And then for each of the people who participated in that interview, and again, for some of you it was one person, for some of you it was two people, I want you to tell me one or more things that they did well and one or more things that they could have done better. And I'm going to give them a summary of what those things were. They'll get some numbers averaged together for these things, but they're going to get definite thoughts that you gave, just like with your course evaluations at the end of the semester. What could they have done better? What did they do well? I'll give them both of those. So the first part of it is about the person or the people who did the interviews. The second part of the survey relates more to the process. And I'm going to ask you some questions. In your opinion, were the questions that they asked you related to the job? Now, I encouraged them as they were building out this process to not ask you a lot of generic questions, but to really focus on that job description. So you tell me how well they did that. Were the questions that they asked you kind of irrelevant? And you thought, why in the world are they asking me this? Or were they related to the job? Could you see a connection between that question and what you're going to have to do as part of this job? Again, it's strongly disagree to strongly agree. The second question about the process relates to the length. Now, I told them that they needed to be able to do a 30 to 45-minute interview if they wanted to really get to know you well enough to make a decision about whether to hire you or not. So do you think that the length was appropriate? Strongly disagree, strongly agree. There's a follow-up question. If you said strongly disagree or somewhat disagree, should it have been shorter? Should it have been longer? The third thing, did they adequately assess you? Did they take enough time to adequately assess your qualifications? Strongly disagree, strongly agree. The next question was, do you feel that the process that you went through was fair? Would you have had an equal shot of getting hired for this job as somebody else who went through the same interview process? If you say strongly disagree or somewhat disagree, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. What did they do that made you think that it wasn't so fair? The next question, this is the one that is the oddball. And that is the question, do you feel that they asked you any unethical or illegal questions? Remember that you've got to reverse the scoring of this. You're going to strongly disagree that they asked you illegal questions. Where you've been checking perhaps positive answers on the right side, you have to check the left side to get this one right. So it's not asking you, were the questions legal, but do you think that they were illegal? And if you answered, yes, I strongly agree, or I somewhat agree that these questions were illegal or unlawful, then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. What questions did they ask you? Now, you don't have to know word for word, but you should know they asked me a question about this, and I thought that was kind of odd or kind of funny. All right? The next thing as part of the process is, if it was a team, did they work well together as a team? Did they seem to stumble over each other, or did it flow pretty well? Now, understanding if you're one of the first interviews, they're still figuring this thing out. The latter interviews should be better than the first interviews. You have no way of knowing that. So your one experience, did this team seem to work pretty well together? I strongly disagree, or I strongly agree. And I'm going to ask you, if you had two different people as part of your interview team, which one do you think was the best? And my folks are going to get a little bit of a reward for being selected as the best of the group. The last thing that I'm going to ask you related to the process is, if this had been real, Based upon your interactions with this interview group at this particular occasion, would you have accepted a job if they offered you one? Now, please take this completely out of the context of reality. If you are an online student and you've got a great job, obviously you're not going to accept the job from this. But in the circumstances where you're looking for a job and you're honestly doing this interview, trying to qualify for a job and persuade somebody to hire you, in the absence of any other opportunities that you've got, just based upon the interaction with these two people and what you know about this job and how they relayed it to you and expressed it to you, would you have accepted the job if they had offered it? Probably not, definitely not, probably so, definitely so, based upon that interaction. Okay? Then I'm going to ask a little bit, if you had one of the teams, about the team interaction. Give me some feedback on the team as a whole. What could the team have done better or done differently? And then the last thing that we're really going to focus on in this survey is some demographic information. It's going to ask you 3 questions. Are you male or female? Roughly what age are you? I'm trying to determine whether you're a traditional college student, whether you're about to graduate, or you're a non-traditional, you're coming back in your 20s, 30s, whatever. So there are broad categories of the ages. And then I'm going to ask you if you have ever interviewed somebody before, with the understanding being that if you've done this from my side, you're going to have different expectations of me and you're going to score me a little differently. And I'm also going to ask you approximately how many interviews you've been on in the last 5 years. If you've been to a number of interviews from your side, you'll have different perspectives on what this thing ought to look like, and that's going to impact the way that you survey my people. Keep that all in mind as you do this. Let me tell you how the process works of putting it all together. You're going to take this Word document, you're going to open it up, and where there is either a table, you're going to put a check mark or a plus or a 1 or something in the proper block to indicate what your rating is. If it's just an open-ended question that has strongly disagree, somewhat disagree, neutral, somewhat agree, strongly agree, you're going to bold the one that you choose. Where there is an opportunity to give me some feedback, tell me about this person, the positives, the negatives, there'll be a block of space, and you just type into that block of space. Okay? When you're done with this, what I want you to do is to save the file under some random name. You might call it Big Bang Theory .doc, or you might call it Rabbit .doc, or My Little Pony .doc. But it's something that doesn't identify you particularly. The whole point of this from a research perspective is that you need to be anonymous. And if I ask you to put your name on it, you're no longer anonymous. Now, how do we make sure that I can't track this back to you? Once you save this file under this anonymous name, you're going to take that file and you're going to load it to the Dropbox that either Mr. Bass or Miss Aldridge has told you has designated for this Dropbox. You're going to load this file. Now, they are not going to open the file. They have promised me that all they're looking for is, did you do it or did you not? They're going to take these files that your class submits to this Dropbox, and they're going to pull them all in a block to email to me, and they will not open them. So they will know that you submitted a file named Braves.doc, but they don't know what's in that file. When I get that file, I'm going to see a file called Braves.doc with all this stuff in it, but I'm not going to know it came from you. So hopefully you're going to feel comfortable that we are doing this very low-key, that there's no pressure, that you've got the opportunity to say no thank you, but that you will agree to participate anyway, in such a manner that you are not going to track it back to you and we're not going to get on to you for what you said. I will take the information from this, plug it into a spreadsheet, give them some numbers and some statistics on how well they did as an average of all the people that interviewed with them, and give them the summary of the positives and the negatives. Probably will not tell them word for word what you said, but I'll look for themes. If several of you said they seemed real nervous or they seemed very unorganized, I'm going to share that with them. But I'm not going to do it in such a way that they know that it came from you. Understanding that they are only doing 4 interviews. So it may be easy enough for them to figure out that you were the one that was kind of negative through the thing and it probably came from you. We'll try to figure this out in such a way that it's not quite so intimidating to you. Hope that answers all the questions. Gosh, if you have got some questions that I have not addressed in this video, please send me an email. I'll give you my email address again. Mark.grimes at gsw.edu. And I hope on the conclusion of this that you have had a really good experience with this, that it has been a fun thing. It may have been a little bit nerve-wracking going into the interview, and you may have been a little nervous as you started, but looking back on it from the backside, there was some value in this, and I grew a little bit as an individual in my confidence level about myself, being able to express myself in an interview. And I hope that if you're an HR major, that when it comes time for you to be on this side of the table interviewing the communication students, that you'll be able to reflect back on this and know what they did that you might be able to do to improve upon what they did and to make yours better. We're in a position now, having done this 4 or 5 times, that we're having some students in HR staffing that were part of the process in business communications, and they're drawing from that experience. Well, I've gone on long enough with this, but I wanted again to say thank you very, very much for participating in this project. It is very, very helpful to my students to be able to practice these things and to get feedback from you on doing it. So when you get this survey, if you haven't already, please give very careful and deliberate consideration about doing it accurately and honestly, and giving us really good feedback. It'll help them become better students and better managers in the future. Thanks.